Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Claim Your Seat, the realities of running as a disabled candidate. And so for this webinar, we're using Zoom live transcription services. If you'd like to view live captions on your screen, please click the More menu in the lower right-hand corner and select Show Subtitle. I just want to give it one quick minute before we get started. And just to answer the question in the chat, with this webinar will be recorded, so folks can watch this after. All right, awesome. Let's go ahead and get started. So good evening, everyone. And once again, welcome to our Claim Your Seat, the realities of running as a disabled candidate. For this webinar, we are using the Zoom live transcription services. If you would like to view live captions on your screen, please click the More menu in the right-hand corner and select Show Subtitle. And we're so glad to have you and to discuss what it may be like to run for office as a disabled candidate, whether you're running in 2021 or 2022 or are thinking about running in the future. We hope this conversation tonight will help you think through how your lived experience impacts your work as a candidate and as a community member. Before we get into the program, let me start with a little housekeeping. We have lots of people on the call tonight, and we want to make sure everyone can participate. We have enabled Zoom live transcription and welcome Shelley as our American Sign Language interpreter for the event. In a few minutes, I will be introducing our moderator for tonight's discussion, and then we'll be speaking with our 4 wonderful Run for Something candidates who have specific experiences to share about running for office with a disability. In the meantime, if you would like to participate, if you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat, please do, and make sure that your settings are set to all panelists and attendees, and share your name, where you are, and what brought you to the call this evening. After we get through our introductions, we'll open up the floor for questions. So please put any questions you have for the panel in the Q&A box, and we'll pull questions from there. We definitely want to address your questions, but it will be tough for us to catch questions in the chat box. So please put any questions you have for the panel in the Q&A box. And feel free to use the chat box to comment on the program or interact with other attendees. This is a great chance to get to know people and help build community. And with that out of the way, let's get into the program. So tonight, we are very excited to be focusing on members of the disabled community running for office or thinking about running for office in the future. To put it bluntly, we need more disabled people running for office and getting elected across the country so that your experiences are reflected in the decisions we make in leading our communities. Tonight, our panel represents a range of identities and experiences and certainly doesn't represent the entire community experience. Despite the fact that nearly 1 in 4 Americans has a disability, Americans with disabilities are underrepresented in elected office. Most of us can only identify a handful of politicians with disabilities at only the national level, such as Tammy Duckworth, and most of us may not know of anybody in our state and local governments serving in office with a disability. Elected officials with disability not only tend to have a strong track record on disability-related issues and policies, but often tend to have a strong leadership, creativity, resilience, and problem-solving skills that make them well-rounded candidates. We encourage each and every one of you to consider running for an elected office. And tonight's call is a place for us to come together as a political community invested in candidates from all walks of life to provide honest advice, answer questions, and create a community of support that you will need when you step up to run for office. Broadly, Run for Something is all about encouraging young, diverse progressives to run for office, especially at the down ballot level. More specifically, Run for Something endorses diverse, progressive candidates who are 40 and under, running for the first, second, or third time, and running for down ballot offices, which includes city council, mayor, county commission, state legislature, school board, county clerk, sheriff, district attorney, and many more. Since Run for Something started in 2017, we have identified more than 78,000 young people who want to run for office and have endorsed over 1,600 all-star candidates in all 50 states. So far, Run for Something has elected more than 500 candidates to state and local office. And our winners are 56% women, 56% people of color, and 21% LGBTQIA+. We also provide coaching for our endorsed candidates to support you through every phase of your campaign. We provide resources, trainings, connect candidates with partners who can help their campaigns. We also work with our alumni to support current candidates and to make connections that will help them govern successfully once elected. We do this because we know that more young, diverse, and exciting progressives running strong grassroots campaigns across the country will increase the immediate turnout for Democrats up and down the ticket and help build political power for underrepresented groups across the country. It'll also change the conversation about who is electable in this country. At Run for Something, we focus on down ballot races because we know that these local, county, and state offices are often the ones that with the most direct influence on most people's everyday lives. Elected officials at this level are the ones that set police budgets, determine local anti-discrimination ordinances, and set housing and commercial zoning rules that can define our communities. Down ballot offices determine what our kids learn in school, how funds are allocated for special education students, what reproductive health resources are available in our community, and who gets access to the vote and how elections are run. So we truly hope this call will either help you in your run or convince you to consider running in your community. Okay, and with that said, I'd like to introduce our moderator and partner for this evening, Sarah Lahovich, is that right? From National
Lahovic, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And from the National Council of Independent Living. So thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I am really excited to be here. So the National Council on Independent Living, we are the longest running national cross-disability grassroots organization in the country. It was formed in 1982 and we are a nonprofit. So I just wanted to make the quick disclaimer that we do not endorse candidates and nothing that we are participating in here tonight indicates endorsement of any candidates. But we do education around the issue of running for office with a disability. At Nickel, I work on the issues around civic engagement for people with disabilities, and that includes running for office. I started this job in 2016, and around that time, which is right around the time, I started in late 2016, so right around the time Run for Something formed as well, right after the 2016 election, I was looking at what resources are out there to help people with disabilities navigate the barriers that exist to serving in elected office or even just running a campaign. Unfortunately, there was no information out there, no information on existing candidates and elected officials with disabilities and how they manage to run their campaigns, and not even research on the number of people with disabilities serving in elected office. We still don't really have that research. There's been a little bit of work done on that, but the issue was so unknown just a few years ago that you couldn't even look it up on Google and find even one result. So it became my kind of passion project to figure out how we start to address that. And it's a really huge issue. and certainly something that's going to take more than one person or one organization can do. So I'm really appreciative of Run for Something and their work that they are doing to support diverse candidates. Nickel started in 2019, the first and currently only training specifically for people with disabilities to learn how to run for elected office. And like Run for Something, we really focus on people who are first-time candidates who want to run for a local or state elected office and don't know really where to start or how to go about navigating some of the unique barriers they may face as people with disabilities. And I'm really excited to say that we are, through the generous sponsorship of Run for Something, going to be relaunching this training in October, hopefully, of this year. We're still working on finalizing the schedule right now, but we are hoping to launch another webinar series with some amazing campaign trainers and people from the disability community who have run for office and worked on campaigns to talk about their experience navigating the campaign world and the barriers that exist there and how they have been successful. And that information will be shared with you by Run for Something whenever our registration opens up. We're certainly going to be trying to promote it far and wide so that we can increase the educational resources for people with disabilities so that we can show up in elected office. And I really want to highlight the point of, sorry, getting a little bit of words mixed up here. I really want to highlight a story that I think really shows why it's important to have people with disabilities in elected office. I don't recall, but I feel like Run for Something endorsed David Ortiz in Colorado whenever he ran. And last week, news came out that he was successful in getting legislation in Colorado that would kind of mandate that governments, state and local governments, actually follow the Americans with Disabilities Act, which turns 31 years old this week, and make sure their websites are accessible to people with disabilities. Colorado is the first state in the nation to have legislation at that significant of a level where there would be financial penalties for state and local government to not have ADA compliant or the accessibility guidelines compliant websites. And so it's really important to see the work that people with disabilities are doing in elected office, not just for other people with disabilities, but for the entire community and all of their constituents. And so I'm really excited to be here tonight with some amazing candidates and soon to be elected officials with disabilities who are going to share about their own experiences with running for office. And with that, I want to introduce our first candidate, Jennifer Kitchen, who is a friend of mine, actually, running for the Virginia House, District 25 in 2021 and also ran in 2019. Jennifer is a lifelong rural Virginian running to represent the 25th District, in the Virginia House of Delegates. She's focused particularly on rural issues and how overlooked rural communities are whenever it comes to the Virginia legislatures. And I can say, as someone who lives in Northern Virginia, that's certainly true. We tend to be overrepresented in Virginia politics, and focusing on issues of rural broadband, healthcare access, and equitable funding for schools. So I wanted to hand it over to Jennifer.
Yeah, figure out how to unmute myself. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for having me. I am a second-time candidate for the Virginia House of Delegates. I am a member of the disability community. I navigate my life with fibromyalgia, chronic pain. I am also a cancer survivor and a brain aneurysm survivor. This, of course, brings a lot of challenges to running for office, but it also brings a lot of opportunity. I have a perspective that is needed. Our collective perspective is needed in state legislatures everywhere. I'm very excited to hear that that precedent-setting work being done in Colorado. Something that I would love to see happen here in Virginia is to make sure that our municipal meetings are accessible to everyone. All of our local government meetings need to be accessible to everyone that lives in the community. Challenges of running with a disability. I mean, you know, there's a very specific schedule that you have to be able to keep. But running this time, the first time I ran without staff. It was a very small campaign. This time running a much larger scale campaign, but bringing on a team, it was very important to me to find people who were understanding of who I am and what I need, and what that means for representing a larger community. So that is definitely a special step that you need to consider when running for office, is who are you going to surround yourself with? They need to be compassionate people who are good at their job, but are also good at understanding what you need. And I'm looking forward to answering all of your questions as a second-time candidate. I, of course, learned things the first time that I will not be repeating this time. Self-care, self-care, self-care. I think all candidates need to remember that, but especially listening to your body when you're under excessive amounts of stress is incredibly important.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And so I want to go to, wait till we're on the screen here. There we go. I'm going to go to our next participant. Alex Gray is running for Boston City Council as an at-large candidate for 2021. He would be the first, or the only blind city councilor serving in America if elected this year, and the first ever, of course, in Boston City Council. He is an attorney who currently serves as advisor to Mayor Martin Walsh in the city of Boston, and was an advisor to Governor Deval Patrick. He helped to start Boston's first ever tuition-free community college plan under Walsh, and helped launch Fairmount commuter rail line under Patrick. He will focus on ensuring equitable recovery from COVID-19 for Boston, creating more affordable and physically accessible housing options, expanding educational opportunities, and fighting for good jobs that both pay living wages and provide benefits. Alex?
Thank you very much, Sarah, for having me, and thank you for hosting. Thank you to Manny and everybody at Run for Something for not just for tonight, but the work that you do on a daily basis. Truly honored to have your endorsement and be a partner with you in this race. And thank you to everybody for joining us tonight. This is truly, from my experience, a one-of-a-kind opportunity, and I hope the first of many. And so, as mentioned, my name is Alex Gray. I'm running for one of the 4 at-large city councils, citywide seats here in Boston. I live in the Jamaica Plain neighborhood of Boston with my wife, Lauren, and our now 46-day-old son, Emerson. So 2021 is proving to be quite the exciting year in the life of Alex Gray. And, you know, I'll just touch briefly on, you know, for me, I think I decided the reason that I would run this year is I thought that the world now more than ever needed great listeners in positions of power. And, you know, I certainly was not born a great listener. My mother has videos to prove it, but I became a great listener when I went blind. And I think it's one of those things you don't realize till you're later, that your disability is not something that defines you, but certainly it shapes you. And it shaped me into being a better listener. And I think we can all agree, after 4 years where the loudest words on cable television and the most divisive words on social media, day after day after day, always seem to rule the day, that we need more listeners in positions of leadership now more than ever. So Sarah mentioned some of the things I've done in my career, but I've always done them with listening at the core, listening to the people we serve. So honored to be here and look forward to the conversation ahead.
Great. Thank you. Great. Next up, we have Marjorie Velasquez, New York City Council District 13, 2021 and 2017 candidate. Marjorie was born in the Bronx to Puerto Rican parents who moved here in the 1970s to build a better life. She learned the values of hard work and community services at a young age, as her parents worked long hours while struggling to overcome racism and language barriers. She attended the Bronx Public Elementary Schools and St. Catherine Academy before earning a financing and accounting degree at NYU. She held several accounting positions where she designed strategies for regions around the world. In 2012, Marjorie suffered life-changing injuries in a workplace accident and subsequent car crash that left her temporarily disabled. She struggled through several surgeries and a broken bureaucratic healthcare system, but found a path to recovery through giving back to our community. Marjorie's life went from painful struggle to public service. She volunteered to help elect several elected officials and joined Community Board 10, where she served as treasurer and now serves as municipal services chair. Here she is focused on COVID recovery, transportation, parks, budget equity, and overdevelopment while advocating for racial and gender equality. She serves on the boards of Amplify Her, the Broad Room, St. Joseph's School for the Deaf Children's Fund, Visions New York, and formerly on the Bronx River Alliance. After a narrow loss for City Council in 2017, where she was outspent by over $1 million, she continued her dedication to public service and advocacy. And during the pandemic, she organized a mutual aid group to assist residents and coordinates weekly food and mask drives. Marjorie?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. And so as the bio read, back in 2012, I did sustain some unfortunate events that led to having me being disabled. And so when I was juggling and deciding whether to run or not, and I saw someone ask the question, I needed to know if I was physically able to knock on doors, because that's the conception, right? That, it's just mainly one on doors, right? And so as we have seen now, social media does play a vital role, and you still have a voice in many different ways. Back to what Jennifer had mentioned earlier, it is knowing your body, knowing your limitations, right? It is having a focus on self-care, but it's also using yourself, your story, your life experiences, and showing who you are, and this can be possible, right? I literally couldn't walk for a while. I couldn't even use my hand. So like the mere idea of knocking a door just scared me, right? But it was taking that step back and knowing that my story, right? This broken system that didn't work for me had to come out. This story of how we can work together and elevate each other and amplify and actually fix the system together was more important at certain parts than me being shy or embarrassed, right? So there's also that whole pride thing that I had to deal with, and this mentality of what normal looks like. And I was not at that stage. And it was a lot of me fighting that first. And once I did do that, it was also knowing my body and knowing and setting the limitations. So when you do have staff and you hire staff and interns, it is actually having a heart-to-heart with them and letting them know, I might not show it because of XYZ, but I will let you know when I'm in pain and we will take stops, right? Or I will let you know what my limitations are. Because at one point when I was actually helping out at another campaign, I had pushed myself a little too hard to a point where I had worsened my condition, right? So I couldn't walk for a whole week, like my legs just stopped working again. And it was, taking back to that story of focusing on knowing yourself, knowing your bodies, but also knowing your story and knowing that it has value and sharing it. And we all have a way of getting it out there, and that it gives you a different lens when you're looking at, right? For me, it really honed in what transportation looked like in my community, right? The limitations that our transit system has for folks who are walking with either a cane, crutches, right? At points I had a wheelchair. So it is knowing and navigating a system like that and looking through these lenses now and knowing how we can advocate for others, and knowing that certain limitations and certain disabilities are not just physical. And we also have to realize that, and definitely when you've gone through all the things that I've gone through, certainly it provides perspective, not just like what you would see with healthcare, but it's also transportation, and it's such the intersectionality of it all within our communities. And I'm happy to be with everyone today and love to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you. And finally, but last but not least, we have Chandra Bishop, elected Urbana, Illinois City Councilor, Ward 5 in 2021 and 2020 candidate for Champaign County Coroner, excuse me. She has been a public health professional and community leader for the last 6 years, working both in nonprofit and government organizations. Her work has focused on creating strategies to increase visibility, participation, and the well-being of underserved communities through health education and promotion. Chandra has always had a desire to help people, especially those who may not be in the position to help themselves. Excuse me. She has led health education and promotion programs in several communities throughout Illinois, with particular attention to underserved communities. Underserved communities are particularly vulnerable to premature and preventable deaths. So by working with other organizations, she has been able to make an impact in areas such as protecting children from unintentional injury, substance abuse, and chronic disease prevention. Her work in the community continues through her role with the United Way of Champaign County, where she collaborates with the health departments, hospitals, and mental health board in Champaign and Vermilion County.
Thank you, Sarah. And good evening, everyone. I'm so excited to be here to share my story. As Sarah said, my name is Chandra Bishop. I live in Urbana, Illinois, where I currently sit on the City Council representing Ward 5. But before I get into all that, I'll give you a quick summary of my background. When I finished my master's in 2013, I worked several years as a health educator for Adams County Health Department in Quincy, Illinois. It was during that time there that my life changed. Most people look at me and wouldn't suspect a thing. They think that my shaved head was a fashion choice. I mean, as well as I pull the look off, it isn't a choice. I have cancer. I was diagnosed in 2016 at the age of 29 with a rare cancer that forms in the bile ducts called cholangiocarcinoma. I immediately began my chemotherapy, and of course, treatments eventually takes its toll and with side effects, and I began to lose my hair, thus my very unique look. In the midst of treatment, I got an offer for a new job in a different city, and I never thought to stop working while in the midst of treatments. Most days I felt fine, and the days I didn't, I sort of just pushed through it. I asked myself, do cancer patients change jobs in the middle of treatment? Will my health insurance coverage continue seamlessly? Will this new job be as accommodating of my Friday afternoon chemo treatments? Do I have to find a new doctor? I didn't want to put my career on hold either. So less than 6 months after my diagnosis, I moved from Quincy to Springfield and began a new job. And that energy is the recurring theme of my cancer journey. Cancer hasn't held me down. And as that position in Springfield ended, I then found myself here in Champaign-Urbana working in public health. And I'm something of an accidental political candidate or elected official. I volunteered on a couple campaigns, did some door knocking, phone banking, and then someone suggested I run for something. Well, I didn't think I was qualified to run for any position, let alone a county-wide position. I had to be convinced to run for county coroner to go up against someone who had held this position for 16 years. And as I considered running for office, I had some of those same questions that I mentioned I had around changing jobs. Can someone with cancer run for and hold a political office? Is my disability something people needed to know in order to vote for me? When I was first diagnosed in 2016, I told no one in those first 5 or 6 months, except my close family and friends. But I realized that I could be an advocate for this rare cancer. And in order to get the attention it needed from researchers and funders, more people needed to know about this rare cancer. I received overwhelming support from my friends and family and even strangers once I finally did, reveal that I was going through cancer and cancer treatments. So I was fine talking about it in my personal life, but I wasn't too keen about talking about it as I ran my campaigns. Eventually, though, I realized that I had a platform, so I no longer held back if I had the opportunity to discuss my cancer. But that's not to say it wasn't difficult, but I think it's important because it demystifies some of the harmful stigmas about what disabled people can and cannot do. And it's sort of in the same way that we should care about our Black communities outside the realm of criminal justice reform. We should care about and listen to our disabled communities beyond their disabilities. Running for office is an experience like no other. Running while being treated for cancer is a whole different kind of experience. During much of my campaign for coroner, I had to travel 3 hours to St. Louis for treatments every couple weeks. The thing about the side effects of chemo is sometimes they're intense, sometimes they're unpredictable, but one of the ever-present constant side effects was fatigue. So I would take naps after work before heading out to talk to constituents and do phone banking. And as I mentioned, aside from the lack of hair on my head, no one could tell that I had a disability when I rang their doorbell. Even though I was unsuccessful in that campaign for coroner, my motivation to run for office remained. And soon after, I began my campaign for the seat on city council. That motivation came from the love of my community and realizing I did have what it takes to fight for improvements for the most impacted communities. And throughout my journey, I've maintained my full-time job, I've volunteered in my community, and as I said, successfully was elected as city councilwoman. I've learned repeatedly over the last couple of years that representation matters. And as a Black woman with an invisible disability, I have to share my story and journey with cancer to give others hope, to show that there's no typical cancer patient, to help others survive, to let others know that they can go for and do whatever they want. Having cancer doesn't have to hold you down. And we have to keep pushing through. And I'm very excited to answer any questions that anyone may have about running while fighting cancer. Thank you.
Great. Thank you to all of our panelists here for sharing. And I'm going to hand it over to Manny, because I think he's going to moderate the Q&A coming in.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you all so much for sharing your stories that, basically a lot of resilience and perseverance that gets you to where you are today. So we really appreciate you all joining us and sharing your stories, because they're so valuable. The first question, and actually for folks who are here, if you would like, just a reminder, please drop your questions using the Q&A feature so that I can make sure I see them instead of in the chat. They sometimes get buried in the chat. So please use the Q&A feature. But the first question is from Lucas Brodsky, which is a good question that I think applies to all folks running for office. But what kind of job experience best helps prepare someone to run for office? I'll open this up to everybody.
I just think hi, Marjorie here. I think it's your life experience, right? Live your authentic self. When you're running, people want to see you and what you can bring to the table and what your experience within your community and how you can amplify and bring the community up to the next level, right? It is delivering the basics, right? Constituent services, and also like taking it up a steps, right? Like what legislation you can produce, right? You can learn those, like what legislation is, reading legislation, passing legislation, those little tricks of the trade you could learn while on the job, because you're not going to do it alone. Here in New York City, within the city council, you have a legislative aide, right? You hire a legislative director to guide you through that. When it comes to budgeting, that's another function for city council, you will have someone there hired. So it is more about who you are as a person, what drives you to deliver to your community and your lived experience. That's what we want to hear. We want more real people, right? We don't want the cookie cutter, because you know what? Our communities are not cookie cutters, right? Our communities are diverse, and that's the beauty of it, and how we can deliver those stories out there and how we can showcase the beauty of our communities is what we're about. So your lived experience, your authentic self is the most important thing that you need to run for office. When it comes to everything else, you'll see it and you'll figure it out.
I just want to wholeheartedly agree with everything Marjorie just said. My work history is bizarre. I grew up helping out on farms. I have lots of retail experience, customer service. I was a massage therapist until I was diagnosed with chronic pain and could no longer be there for my clients. Now I work for a chapter of the ARC. I am a program mentor. I create programming for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities, but none of those not one of those jobs is really what prepared me, but it's all of the interaction with people. It's knowing my community. It's growing up here. And it just, yeah, that's the authentic experience of the people that live here. And that's what needs to be represented.
Yeah, Alex here, I can jump in. So a bit of it depends, right? I think the vast majority of offices, backgrounds are all over the place. Obviously, if you're looking to be a district attorney or attorney general, a legal background is required. If you're looking to be a county treasurer or something along those lines, a financial background would be beneficial for the most part in terms of your campaign and who you're competing with. But I think for the vast majority, the types of jobs we're talking about here, city council, state representative, if you have an elected school committee or school board, I think that really this is a people-driven business, and you need to have a passion and a willingness to engage with people. In my experience, we're closing in on 10,000 doors knocked, and I have knocked doors where I've been asked a million questions about my platform and where I stand on issues. And for the majority of times when I leave those doors, people say, well, thank you for coming. You'll have my consideration. I have knocked doors and been literally yelled at for 5 minutes about all of the perceived problems by this individual in our city. And I've just, varied between, okay, thank you for sharing that. And all of those times, folks have left with saying, you have my vote or you have my whole family's vote. So much of this is showing up and showing interest in people. Sometimes you feel like you're doing a bit of counseling, perhaps, from time to time. But I do think that on a school committee or city council or state representative, this is not about who has the best plan for healthcare in America. This is not always about educational policy. It's about a willingness to roll your sleeves up, make more phone calls, knock more doors, show up to more events. Because at the end of the day, oftentimes policy isn't as much as the personal connection that you make with voters. So, I wouldn't sell anybody short on their background. You have a lot to offer. With a disability, I'm sure you learned empathy, understanding that life's not always fair. It doesn't always work out the way that we thought it would at the beginning of our lives, and there's no judgment on that. So, like I talk a lot about listening. I was not a good listener until I started to go blind. So your disability in many ways will make you a stronger candidate, but at the end of the day, there's got to be a willingness to connect with as many people as often as you can, from my experience.
I mean, I co-sign everything that everyone else on the panel has said. Like it's about who you are. It's about what perspective you can bring to that office. We've seen over time that, that same sort of assembly line of political candidates have sort of ruined our system. We don't need any more, people who graduate from Yale and then go to Harvard Law and then, find their way into politics. We don't need any more of that. We need the people who have that lived experience to be able to help us change a system that's, been completely broken. So as Alex said, don't discard yourself from having from being able to run for office and from any job that you have.
Awesome. Well, that great answers all around there. Next question I have is, I think this question is there's actually a specific question to Alex from Ritika Kanal. What kind of accommodations, assistive tech or otherwise, have helped you do your job effectively, and what do you anticipate as being a barrier for your next chapter when elected?
Thank you very much for the question. I appreciate it. So, I think the types of things I use on a daily basis are, screen reading software on my computer, the program called JAWS, to respond to emails, to post social media, I use a white cane to get around, use voiceover and Siri on an iPhone. So, those are sort of the nuts and bolts of things that I use to help. And, I don't think I'm that out of place in this race. If you're a top tier candidate for an at-large seat in the Boston City Council, you're raising, let's say, somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000. So with that, you have a staff. So, I have my campaign manager, Sam, who, when we need to get to places, will drive. I'll use Sighted Guide to get around with him. Or if I'm out door knocking, I'll usually be with a staff member or an intern that helps me get from place to place. But it's sort of, they bring me in front of the door and I start talking. So, and I don't think that's uncommon, for the average person in my race. It might be a little bit different if it's a smaller office that you're running for, and the amount of money raised is not, like I said, $100,000 or $200,000 budget. But those are some of the things I'm trying to bring some specific aspects of the blindness community into the race. I'm typing a short note on every single one of the palm cards that we leave on doors with my Braille writer. So as we are stuck in Boston traffic, bumper to bumper, my campaign manager has to hear me clanging away on my Perkins Brailler as I'm writing just a quick note, vote Alex Gray. So done that on about 10,000 palm cards. So I think that's all of it. If I think of more, certainly feel free to reach out if you have any more questions. Be happy to talk offline.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. This next question is for, everybody. It's a question from Yeni DeRoches, which is, how do you answer the question / accusation of, but won't your disability get in the way of your job type of question?
I mean, I feel like as a woman, I've been asked this question in varying forms, especially as a mom, like, won't your kids get in the way? There's always something, right? I really feel like our lived experience, like we keep saying, our disabilities allow us to have a perspective that's needed, that's necessary, that's helpful. And it's not only helpful to the disability community. The able-bodied community benefits when the disability community is centered. When we talk about intersectionality all the time, and I firmly believe, you can't get me to not believe that disability is the intersection of every other community. When we center our community and our experience, everyone benefits.
I mean, there is certainly, I think all of us on this call who have a disability would agree that there is a stigma that people with disabilities face, call it low expectations, call it what you want, that is formidable. And I have certainly felt that stigma, walking into job interviews, throughout my career, dating back to when I graduated college. I mean, somewhere in the vicinity of 8 out of 10, people with disabilities are out of work in America. So it's, the highest, population of folks out of work that I can think of in America. And, I think it's interesting though, in this race, that question has not come up, and it's come up in every other job interview that I've ever been a part of. And this campaign, since I jumped in on September 23rd, amounts to more or less the largest and longest job interview I've ever been a part of. I think some of that has to do with the fact that Boston has diversified its Boston City Council. So we've seen, it's a majority minority Boston City Council now. So there's a natural avenue to talk about diversity and inclusion, and expanding that to include disability, which I talk a lot about because I think it's been used rightfully and successfully by a number of candidates over the past decade. So it will be something, I think, that over the course, depending on your disability of the campaign, I'm sure there will be days that you perhaps wish you did not have a disability, as probably all of us do at different points in our lives. But, I think there will be some days where you will make personal connections with people on the doors because of the fact that you have a disability that you would never have had, but for the fact that you have a disability. And it will also make you stand out in a way that in politics can be good. I'm in a 17-person race. The fact that I have a disability has gained me some earned media. that I don't think had to do with any of the work that I did, but it had to do with the fact that it's a unique candidacy. So it's been different in that regard than any other job I've ever applied for.
Okay. Thank you so much. One of the other questions we saw is, I think, let me see. Joey asked, I think, yeah, here it is. How did you learn to tell your story? So folks, yeah, how did you learn to tell your story? Because I think this is, especially with disabilities, a very personal, very personal story. So how did you go about learning how to use that for all y'all?
Well, it took me a while to share my story. I think someone mentioned in the comments way at the beginning that they were in denial of their disability. And I sort of was too at first, like, but I think knowing that, one, that I have a rare cancer, and like when I tell people I have cancer, they automatically think, oh, you have breast cancer. No, like there are different types out there. And so I began to tell my story because I wanted people to know what cholangiocarcinoma was, and the fact that the number of people being diagnosed with it globally has started to increase. So we need more research and focus on, different types of cancer. And so that's sort of how I began to tell my story. And then also because, as I said, at the beginning, representation matters. Like people need to know that, having a disability does not stop you or prevent you from pursuing whatever you want to pursue. So I'm here to share my story and be an example and hopefully like an inspiration to someone else. And so I don't want to, selfishly keep those little nuggets that I've learned along the way from everyone else.
Anybody else's thoughts on this?
I will share that I feel like I'm still learning how to tell my story. And so it's a process you start, and sometimes you fail and you learn from that and you just figure it out from there. But I feel like I'm still somewhere in the middle of my story too. My cancer battle was just last year. I'm not quite a year out from chemo and from brain surgery. And so I feel like I'm still sort of navigating what my story is. And so I'm developing that as it unfolds.
Yeah, I would echo what was just said. I mean, your story or your stump speech, your personal narrative, call it what you want, it's always evolving and it changes, depending on the audience and how much time you have. I mean, I'm sure other folks on this call have been, I've been on Zoom calls where I've been literally given 10 seconds and I've been on that where I've been given 10 minutes or an hour as a candidate. So, you need to sort of think about your life. Somebody recommended to me, what's important to do is write down as much about your life as you can. It could be like 5, 10, 30 pages, because you never know what part of it later on you're going to pull out, and depending on the audience and depending on the time. And, for me, when I talk about my story right now, I think a lot about what the world needs. And we are so divided. There's no doubt about it as a nation. And I think I emphasize listening a lot because, again, it's something that I think is powerful because I think of disability as a part of the normal human condition, right? It's not a tragedy. It's not anything, to find inherent inspiration in. It's just part of my life. And why I emphasize that is because I became a better listener because I became disabled. And I'm sure, we think a lot about after the pandemic, where we're going to talk a lot about adaptability. There's no more adaptable group of people I have ever met in this world than people with disabilities. Again, and after 4 years of, toxic rhetoric in the White House, in DC, I just think that what the world needs more now than ever is empathy and the ability to put themselves in other people's shoes. And I think people with disabilities have that, again, more than any other group of people. So I think in telling your story, you have the ability to normalize, what it is to have a disability and to make people see that, again, it's something that shapes you, but it doesn't define you. And, my dad used to say, we're all temporarily able in one way or another. So, I think that is the value of telling your story.
Just want to say, damn, that is really good on the temporarily able. That's real. So appreciate that, Alex. Michael Angeloni asks, during your campaigns, did you find that people, whether it was your competition or constituents, who try to pigeonhole you as, quote, the disabled candidate, unquote? And if so, what did you do to get away from that pigeonholing?
That's not something that I've experienced. I have not been put in that box and kept there by anyone.
I don't think I have either. And if they do try to pigeonhole you, you can, sort of tout your other the other things you bring to the campaign and to that position. Just because they try to pigeonhole you doesn't mean they have to succeed.
So I appreciate y'all, and I'm glad that nobody's trying to pigeonhole anybody. So that's legit. One of the other questions I have, which is I think an incredibly important part of all campaigns, is fundraising. So how are y'all did you incorporate your story into fundraising for your campaign?
I don't. When I'm fundraising, I talk about my plans for representing the people of my district, the job that I intend to do once I get to Richmond, and it's just not so. Like, again, it doesn't define me, and so it's not something that defines what I will be doing for folks. It helps inform my story and decision making process, but it's not something that ever comes up in fundraising.
I guess what I would say is that there's a couple of things, like getting back to the last question and this question, I'll sort of combine it. I think there's a couple different ways you can talk about disability, when it comes up, whether people try to pigeonhole you or whether you're trying to sell it. You can talk about disability in the context of the fact that the things that make the lives of people with disabilities better tend to make everybody's life better. And so, when we think about something like an elevator at a subway station, it's not just something that benefits the lives of people with disabilities, it's something that benefits somebody, who twisted their ankle and they're on crutches playing basketball. It's the type of thing that if you've ever, been trying to push a stroller to look over and see a massive set of stairs and you realize, oh, quickly there's an elevator, there's something that improves your life. The folks that are walking down the street and are nose deep in their iPhone only to hear the audio indicator go off to know that they can cross the street. So, I think you can talk about the fact that the things that improve people with disabilities lives, improve everybody's lives in one form or another, whether it's, that day or later in their life when they are a loved one. Because, if 4 people in America, chances are one of them is going to have a disability. And then, I think around, the fundraising, I think it really just comes down to your comfort level. I think if you want to, there's an opportunity, I think, to lean into the fact that you have a disability. And you can do that in a way where you talk about, bringing people together, the fact that disability community is the greatest, untapped resource in the equity conversation. There's a lot of ways you can go with it, but I think it really comes down to your comfort level. There's nothing wrong with being a candidate that is quote unquote the disability candidate, and there's nothing wrong with being an incredibly qualified candidate who has a disability. It's really just the way that you want to run your campaign.
Awesome. Thank you all. So one of the other questions I got from Austin Davis, which is, when knocking doors full time is not doable for physical reasons, what do people do instead? And what are the results? So, which, funny enough, I think a lot of folks got to realize firsthand because of the pandemic about that experience. So, yeah, open that up for everybody.
I think for me, you as a candidate, and then there's you as the campaign. First, for us, it was the ability to have phone banking and text banking early on. And there are various different companies that facilitate that for you and your team, right? So that way, like a company like Through Talk would be one that we would use that helps us become like an auto dialer. And so that way you can maximize how many calls you can have per session. That's one way. Text banking is another way. And then for other ways, it's just like anything else where social media has a huge impact. And as for me as a candidate, where I was able and when I was able to, I would knock doors. And when I knew my limitations, I would follow up with a phone call to just check in on folks, especially during the earlier stages of the pandemic. People just wanted to hear a voice on the other line. There was this need of not feeling alone, and certainly just knowing that someone was out there reaching out to you was important, and just letting them know, look, we're here. We're here to help you. Just guide us through what would be the best way to help you. And it goes back to our experiences where there's this shared empathy and understanding on a different lens, and just making sure that folks knew that the help is always there and your presence was always there in these darkest days.
I agree. Phone banking, text banking, and relying on your team to do lid drops or door knocking for you when you couldn't. I know I did rely heavily on my team as I ran my campaigns, because and that would be just for anyone. You can't be all places all the time. So whether you're able-bodied or not, you have to have a whole team around you.
Yeah, I have an incredibly large district that I'm running in. I don't know how familiar folks are with Virginia geography, but my district starts just west of Charlottesville and goes to the West Virginia line. It takes hours to drive across my district. So I have to have groups of volunteers, teams, parts of our kitchen cabinet, we call them. And yeah, you have to surround yourself with people you can rely on to do that hard work when you aren't able, either physically you're having a bad day, or you just can't get there because of geography. Because I think that every campaign relies on these things heavily. It's not something that you feel like it's not going to set you apart. It's not going to make your campaign look any different. All campaigns are doing these things.
Yeah, I would agree with it, what everybody says. A successful campaign is a successful team, right? And so, if this is football, the quarterback isn't running out to catch the passes, they're throwing the passes, right? So I think, if you're not able to door knock, then you want to double down on phone calls. I think that you want to think about house parties. You want to think about, getting yourself earned media, letters to the editor, opinion pieces in your local newspapers about issues that matter to you, reaching out to reporters, trying to get them to cover you. And I'll be perfectly honest, there's never been a job application process I've ever been a part of that has helped me with having a disability, like I said, except for running for office, because there's a lot of people that are interested in covering it. So I think in a weird way, it's a benefit. So you just have to think about all the different tools in the toolbox. And again, push your volunteers if you have them to door knock, but you can still win if you don't knock a single door. Don't let that ever make you think you shouldn't run for office.
Great answers, y'all. So one of the questions that I have is, especially as somebody who is elected, I myself am a state representative here in New Hampshire, but for y'all, like, I struggle with this. So it is, how do you, as a person who belongs to an underrepresented community, there's always pressure on you to represent, your community. For me, obviously being like the Latino community, how do you balance that out both in your campaign approach and in your goals as an elected official? And I dropped the heavy one here.
I mean, you run for office to represent your whole district, and whether that's, in Massachusetts, 40,000 people as a state representative, or, the office that I'm running for up to 700,000 people. So, you always need to be thinking of the calculus of how can I be a person that appeals and is doing the right thing for as much of my community and district as possible. And I think that, for myself, if I'm to be elected, disability is going to be a big part of my portfolio. There's no doubt about it. And there's no shame in that, but, fighting for good jobs with good wages, the work I've done over the past 5 years, that's going to be a big part of it. Trying to expand housing that's affordable and accessible, that's going to be a big part of it. So, I think you just want to think about when you're talking about it that, in my case, I'm not shying away from disability, but I'm talking about other things. When you think about social media, that not every single post is about disability, that you're talking about the issues that matter to people. And you're going to events, that represent, women's groups, communities of color, the LGBTQ plus population. I think, it's not a science by any means, it's more of an art, but if you're successful to get elected, I'm sure you'll have the ability to do it once you're in office.
I really appreciate everything that Alex just said, and what he was saying before about being a good listener. To be a good leader, you have to be a good listener. And so I think that as long as we are listening to everyone in our community, and like we said before, when the disability community is centered, everyone benefits. I think as long as we are talking about those issues, even if we're looking at it through the lens of someone who lives with a disability, that our constituents will only benefit from them.
I'll always say it reminds me of when, I think when the tides rise, all boats rise as well. So like, I think it's very much in that light. So I 100% agree with you, Alex and Jennifer. Those are 100% right. So question from Ritika, which is, if you could go back and tell your high school self anything, knowing what you know now, what would you say?
Take a deep breath. It's gonna be okay. Relax a little bit.
You won't even know those people in 10 years. Like, so don't even worry about what they think about you or what you're doing, what you're wearing. Yeah.
I guess I would say to myself, you will regret not doing something much more than you will ever regret making a mistake and trying to do something.
Get out of your own head and in your way.
That's what's up. Sarah, question from Sarah Rogers. Who has been the most beneficial advisor or mentor for you throughout the process of running for office?
I have like two mentors. One was the former city council member, the person who, when I ran in 2017, I was looking to replace because he was term limited, and that's council member James Vaca, who had dedicated his entire life to this community, serving on the school board, then as district manager, and ultimately as city council member, served over like 30 years in just public service, and seeing that his hard work and determination started and ended with community first. And then also being part of a historic campaign for the first woman of color, or the first person of color, district attorney in all of New York State, and that is Darcel Clark, and seeing her break that barrier, and just her whole life story and how she continued to build up. And she's always been a resource for me because, you know, she faced so many obstacles in life, and just having her as a woman and a woman of color, for me, it was just amazing to see and to experience, right? Because, you know, as a woman of color, for me, like, I haven't had the ability to have those one-on-ones with someone who has had these experiences, and sharing experiences, and just knowing what to anticipate and hearing it firsthand on how she dealt with them. And it's just knowing what's on the other side. Sometimes, you know, there's this like tunnel vision that we have when we're running, and just you can't see what's on the other side. And she's there just to reassure me that it's going to be okay. And I love her to death, and I love Jimmy to death, and both Darcel and Jimmy continue to this day to be huge supporters and mentors, and always there just to give me support.
For me, it's Sam Rasool, who was a candidate for lieutenant governor during the primary. He's also a member of the Virginia House of Delegates. I hope to work with him in Richmond. But when I was just starting out as a community organizer and I met him, he was one of the first people to take me seriously, and one of the only people in Richmond that understands what it means and what it is to be a rural Virginian, and how we're underrepresented, and the work that needs to be done out here. And I know that I can always pick up the phone or send him a text, and he will respond. He will take me seriously, and he genuinely cares about our communities.
I'm going to be a typical politician here and not quite directly answer the question. I'm fortunate. I have probably a handful of people that I go to depending on the situation, but the people that I think you want as your mentors are the people that are honest with you, the folks that tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. Because I think, you know, during a stressful campaign, you're often, you know, wanting to hear that what you're thinking about doing is the best way to do it, or that you don't have to worry about something else. But, you know, you always want to be listening to the people, again, that are always honest with you, and, you know, deliver the news that is not, again, always what you want to hear, but what you should be hearing at that moment.
Yeah, it's so difficult to pick just, you know, one mentor. I feel like a lot of people have sort of guided me through this process of running. As I said, I felt like I feel like an accidental politician, because I sort of, you know, fell into this, started off helping other people on their campaigns, and then, you know, it was like, oh, we see something in you, you should run. But I think our local state rep has really sort of helped me the most. She won her position in 2014 against against a person that was more supported, and, you know, had all this money behind them, but she sort of persevered through that. And so whenever I found myself in a challenge throughout the campaign process, and as you just said, like, you want someone to tell you the truth, to tell you, like, if you do it this way, this is going to happen, because trust me, I went down that road. So I think Carol Emmons has really helped me through my political journey, and I don't think that I probably would have run a second campaign without, you know, her encouragement and help through everything. So
That's amazing. So to wrap, there's one question that Amanda always asks, and then I'll turn it over to Sarah. But the last question I want to ask y'all is, what is bringing you joy right now?
Spending time with my nieces.
I mentioned it at the beginning, but you know, in the midst of a campaign, we decided that it was time to expand our family. So our 46-day-old son Emerson, who is very cute, and I think my wife gets all the credit for that, and he's very big, which I think I receive all the credit for that. But you know, no doubt about it, you know, before I leave in the morning and when I come home, you know, he is the source of the greatest joy for all of us.
Like my children, absolutely. My children are always a source of joy in my life. They're very fun ages at 11 and 13, so the joy is sometimes a little bit more spread out, but it's still there.
What's bringing me joy? Probably my dog. And I saw, Jennifer, you hold up your dog too, but this is my baby. Oh, you can't see him. Yeah, the background is on, but oh, there he is. He is a Yorkie, and he is my baby, my fur baby. I don't have any children, so he is it. And he's been every time I'm on Zoom at home, he finds himself in my lap and has to make an appearance. But you know, after a long day, like he gives that unconditional love, and so, you know, he definitely brings me joy.
You're lucky, Chandra, because my dog's love is very conditional on treats. So there you go. I'd like to pass it back to Sarah. I want to thank you all, but pass it back to Sarah to answer a few other questions. But and then I'll go ahead and wrap. So Sarah, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, I wanted to answer. There was a question that came in from Manisha in the Q&A a while back, but asking about what do you do whenever you're on, you know, living on Social Security benefits, and it's kind of a complex question. I'll read it out, but I want to address one part and then ask you, the other folks on the call, if they have some input. The question is, as someone who literally has nothing but my motivation and drive in mind, no supports, informal or formal, because of the system, no transportation, no legal help, no money, I live on SSI and government benefits, how do we start? I can't even get my apartment doors open. How do I knock on doors? I have had and can have great social media presence, but when it comes to the money, structure, and physical work, what do I or we do? So I really wanted to address this because of the issue around Social Security. And this is a question I have to say I probably get 1 or 2 people a week contact me about. Can I run for office or serve in elected office if I'm on Social Security benefits? And unfortunately, the Social Security Administration doesn't have any publicly available information on this. But and I'll drop the link in the chat, but I reached out to them. And unfortunately, the way that they view it right now is that even running a campaign is considered substantive gainful activity. So they count it as work, even though you're not earning money, even though it's very different from holding a job. And that's really frustrating because I've known disabled candidates who have run for office while on Social Security, and they've ended up at risk of, you know, losing those benefits because the information simply isn't out there. I will say though that, and this is getting kind of technical, but if you're on Social Security, there's something called a trial work period, which can last up to 9 months, and you can work with a local certified benefits planner and maybe use that trial work period as your opportunity to run for office. The unfortunate thing about that is that's only 9 months, and if your campaign outlasts that, you're in the same boat. And this is an incredibly frustrating and unfair and really horrible way that the system continues to penalize disabled people, low-income people, people who have disabilities. It's something that I've talked to lawyers about, and unfortunately, we haven't found a good litigation alternative. I'm currently pursuing whether there can be legislative change on this to make an exemption so that people can even just run for office, let alone consider, serving an elected office. Then you have the issue of there may or may not be a salary there, but getting that exempted from the Social Security regulations. And I could go on a very long rant about how unfair and awful Social Security is in that whole system. There is legislation being discussed to bring people who live on Social Security up to just receiving at the poverty line. They receive benefits 30% below the poverty line. And it's why we need disabled legislators to be working on these along with allies, to be working on these issues to change this system. So I will put that information in the chat, and I will also put my email. It's just Sarah, SARAH @nicol.org, NCIL. And I can connect people to services where they can find a local certified benefits planner. Our Centers for Independent Living, which is what my organization serves, it will work with you it will refer you to a local certified benefits planner who can help figure this out. But I just wanted to make sure I'm clear on that. It's the worst information that I have to deliver time and time again, because it breaks people's hearts. I've told so many people this, and it particularly hurts whenever you're telling someone who's a service disabled veteran that they cannot run for office after serving their country because they're receiving government benefits for the injury that they received in service. And so it's something that I'm looking, we need to change the system so that this is not a problem. And I'm not just going to put this answer out there and say I'm not trying to work on it, but I wanted to make sure that people have that information so that they're not going into this, without the information that they need to make the best choice for themselves. And so, I'll put this in the chat. I have the full answer from Social Security. But that being said, there are options, again, that trial work period. And hopefully those of us here, we can use this as kind of a wake up call that we need to change these systems, because the fact that so many people are kept from participating in a civic right is really an injustice. And one of the many reasons that we're all here today talking about what can we do to serve our communities and make them a better place. So I will go ahead and paste that along with my email, and also wanted to just close out as well with, first thing, thank you so much to the panelists for sharing your experiences. This is the second event I've done in 2 days with disabled candidates and elected officials. And there's so much knowledge that you bring, and really this is the reason that I'm able to work to create campaign training programs and find these resources. Without your knowledge, I would have nowhere to go, because we have to learn from the people who have gone and been trailblazers within the disability community to run for office and learn from their experiences. And particularly when those experiences intersect with gender and race and socioeconomic status and sexual orientation, because all of these things fundamentally impact how people, what experiences you have on the campaign trail, what barriers you experience, how voters perceive you. So this has been really amazing to hear from you, and is certainly motivating for me to continue my work on creating a campaign training program that can serve multi-marginalized people with disabilities. I'm proud to say that my co-creator of this program is Neil Carter from New View Consulting. He's a Democratic campaign operative who has decades of experience and is the only openly disabled campaign consultant and a Black disabled campaign consultant. So we work together to create this program, and we will share this information whenever our registration opens up through Run for Something, and they will certainly share it with you all. So we hope to see you there in the fall when we launch this program. And thank you so much, Run for Something, for hosting this and for your support.
Real quick before we go, I just want to thank you, Sarah, and all the panelists for sharing your experience, wisdom with us tonight. We also thank everyone who participated and asked questions. So everyone on this call will be getting an email from us tomorrow with resources from Run for Something and NCIL to use as you consider running for office. And we need you, and we're here to support y'all. Like as y'all heard, the need is there. We need the representation. We need people who are going to advocate for the needs of disabled people all over our country. So thank you all so much to our panelists who are stepping up and running, and to everyone who's thinking about running. Thank you all so much. And y'all, I hope y'all have a wonderful night. Take care.